Welcome to the Washington Week Bookshelf. I'm Yamiche Alcindor. Tonight we discuss the explosive revelations in the newly released book, This Will Not Pass. Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. The book has helped shed light on the actions of former President Donald Trump and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, among others, and on the days surrounding the January 6th Capitol attack. Joining me tonight to discuss this amazing new reporting are the authors of the book, Alex Burns, national political correspondent for the New York Times, and here in studio, Jonathan Martin, national political correspondent for the New York Times. Well, one, congratulations. You're both my former coworkers, so I'm very, very happy to see your book selling out and just flying off the shelves.
Thank you.
Alex, I want to start with you. You shine a light, and it's such a light on sort of what happened in the wake of January 6th, in the wake of this Capitol attack. I wonder, what did your reporting reveal to you about President Trump and the GOP and sort of how they approached and saw the Capitol attack?
Well, Yamiche, what I think is so important about the narrative in our book is that it really zooms in closely on those days immediately after the insurrection, when the Republican Party's bond with Donald Trump was really, really put to a strenuous test. And the things that you heard in those days from men like Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell was not all that different from what you were hearing from people like Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. They were appalled by Donald Trump's role in ginning up a violent assault on the seat of American government. And for a brief emphasis on brief window of time, they sounded like they were determined to do something about it. And Yamiche, what the book details is how they got to that point with Trump and how they backed away from it. Because within a matter of weeks, Kevin McCarthy is down at Mar-a-Lago again, posing for Donald Trump, posing for a photo with Donald Trump. And Mitch McConnell, to this day, has had very, very little to say in public that matches what he said in private in those days.
It's fascinating the way that you sort of really reveal and open up the curtain behind what was going on in the GOP. I wonder if I could stick with you. What did your reporting tell you about President Trump's ability to continue to hold the grip on the GOP? And I saw an interview where he said Trump wants people to think that he's running for president. Is that part of his grip on the GOP?
Well, the way Trump maintains his grip on the GOP is by way of the voters who support the GOP. In those crucial weeks after the insurrection, there was clearly a moment when people like Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell and Mike Pence might have spoken out more and tried to move public opinion against Donald Trump within the rank and file of his own party. That didn't happen. What Republicans in Washington and the states found was their voters were sticking with the guy for the most part. And what those Republicans then decided, for the most part, was they didn't want to get on the wrong side of their voters. So, a lot of people, I think, like to imagine that Donald Trump has this sort of elaborate, nefarious grip on the Republican Party, when the bottom line is he controls, it's a demand side issue. Voters want Trump within the Republican Party, and so that's where Republican politicians go.
And one more for you, Alex, because I want to get you to weigh in on this abortion reporting. How does that connect to your reporting and the former president's ability to continue to be popular? I interviewed so many voters who didn't like that former President Trump was brash, but who stuck with him, hoping that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. And now it looks like maybe that will happen.
Right. It's a very transactional relationship for a lot of those voters with former President Trump, and certainly for Republican leaders in Washington and around the country. They recognize all the things that other people find offensive about him, and they decide that that's not that important, because what they're going to get in return is 3 Supreme Court justices and perhaps likely the end of Roe v. Wade. I'll just add, Yamiche, in our interview with President Trump, and this actually is not in the book, we asked him about the Republican Party's view on abortion. And I want to emphasize that I'm paraphrasing here. These aren't exact words. He didn't talk about abortion and the right to life in the kind of passionate language of a true believer like Mike Pence. He said basically abortion is a 50-50 issue, and we have our 50% and the Democrats have their 50%. Again, that's not a verbatim quote, but he's talking about it in pretty sort of clinical, tactical terms, not as somebody who believes deeply in his heart, as a person of faith or otherwise, that it's important to protect the rights of the unborn.
No, it's the great political irony of our time, if it happens, that Donald Trump delivered 3 Supreme Court justices potentially who could overturn Roe. And he himself is hardly invested in the issue beyond, as Alex there alluded to, from a strictly political, transactional approach in terms of what it could mean to him in terms of winning the primary and then winning the presidency. And obviously, in that regard, it was critical because a lot of those voters that you just mentioned, Yamiche, who were skeptical about Trump's character or conduct, they said, well, he promised us that he would vote in a certain way or would appoint the right justices, and he put Mike Pence on the ticket. That's a pretty good signal. And the alternative is Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. Well, that's what they're going to vote for. And I think that could prove fateful.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part of your book rollout has been the receipts. I mean, they're longer than the ones you get at CVS. It's just recordings after recordings. I want to come to you first, Jonathan, on this, because there was a report that Kevin McCarthy, I had this reporting at the time too, that he called President Trump and was very angry on January 6th. And you write in the book, no, Trump says, McCarthy has not clashed with him over the phone with a riot still in progress. He wouldn't say that, you said, Trump said. So why then did McCarthy go around claiming to other people that he's tougher with Trump in private than he really is? The former president packed it into two words, inferiority complex. I wonder if you can really, I mean, it's just such good writing. I wonder, what did you learn about this? What surprised you when you think about sort of the interactions that you see behind the scenes versus what people were doing publicly?
Well, it's a great question. I think one of the things that we do with this book in both parties is really shine a light on the difference between the private reality and the public portrayal. We take readers inside the room, and in a lot of cases via primary sources like audio recordings, to capture the fact that these politicians are talking very differently in private about Trump, certainly, but if they're Democrats, talking very differently about their own leaders than they do in public. And I think it's important for voters, for Americans who are watching this, to know what their leaders actually think and what the hell they actually feel. And when it comes to Donald Trump, the vast majority of Republican lawmakers have little regard for Donald Trump, certainly in the Senate and obviously among a lot of people in the House too. But they feel like they don't have a choice, you mean, that they're voters like him, so they have to stick with him. But obviously in private, it's a very different story. And I think Trump sort of knows that some of these folks are playing a double game on him. And that's the reason why he said what he told us there in the interview at Mar-a-Lago, that Kevin McCarthy was trying to portray himself as the sort of tough guy in public. I took it to Trump and told him what he did was wrong. And what Trump is telling us, that didn't happen. And when we asked him why, he put a dagger in McCarthy, right? Inferiority complex. That's what he said.
It's just inferiority complex. I mean, it's just it is, as you said, a dagger. Alex, in this book, you also reveal that in a phone call with other Republican leaders on January 10th, McCarthy, of course, House Minority Leader McCarthy, he called out certain members of his own party, including Matt Gaetz of Florida, Mo Brooks of Alabama. Weigh in here on this idea of what McCarthy is saying in private versus the public persona that he has.
Yeah, Yamiche, I think this is a really, really important moment, and maybe as important as anything that Kevin McCarthy says about Donald Trump. Because on that call that you mentioned on January 10th, he's talking about a couple far-right members of the House Republican Conference, including Matt Gaetz of Florida and Mo Brooks of Alabama, both of whom have said things on and around January 6th that make their colleagues very, very nervous. And some of those colleagues are in leadership, and one of them is Kevin McCarthy. He sees a potential straight line between the things that these guys are saying and the possibility of new violence against members of Congress. This is something that Democrats talk about a lot in public. It's something that a very, very small number of Republicans like Liz Cheney, who's been the target of some of this rhetoric, will talk about in public. You don't hear Republican leaders like Kevin McCarthy out there in public saying, you gotta watch what you say because you never know who's going to take it seriously, take it literally, and then take action. There have been a couple points over the last year. Last summer, folks may remember there was a bomb threat directed at the Capitol. When it was all resolved and the perpetrator was apprehended, Mo Brooks, again, this far-right member from Alabama who addressed the rally on January 6th that preceded the insurrection, after this bomb threat, he puts out a statement essentially sympathizing with the man who made the bomb threat, saying he understands why people would be upset about a tyrannical socialist government. Kevin McCarthy has nothing to say about that. This is a member of Congress sympathizing with someone carrying out a bomb threat. He has nothing to say. What we reveal in the book, and what folks have heard Kevin McCarthy say on the tapes we gathered for this book, is that that kind of language is dangerous and that it could put people's lives in danger. And on January 10th, Kevin McCarthy says that it's very important to him that they not play politics with that because they don't want to be responsible. They don't want to potentially miss something or cause something and regret it later. That's not language that we have ever heard from Kevin McCarthy on camera.
And Jonathan,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the Biden version, the Biden reporting here.
Yeah.
But one quick question.
Sure.
What's keeping President Trump from turning on Kevin McCarthy? Anyone who's covered Trump
Sure.
knows that he just changes his mind if he wants to. Quickly about on that while I
he
ask
still
before I
might
ask you.
yet. I think it's possible that he still could turn on him. There's nothing that's permanent with Trump. And I think it's certainly plausible that at some point he'll sort of stop sort of teasing Kevin. Look, I think the reason right now is very simple. He likes the idea that McCarthy's sort of on a string for him,
Yeah.
that he can humiliate Kevin McCarthy and make McCarthy grovel. And as long as he can do that for a while, as long as that's entertaining him for a while, he'll keep doing it. But to your point, nothing's guaranteed.
Okay, to the Biden administration now. You reveal a lot of the challenges that he's facing, balancing moderates and progressives.
Right.
What can you tell us?
So half the book is on 2021, and President Biden in particular, we sort of cover in depth the tensions in his White House, between his White House and the Vice President's office, and certainly on Capitol Hill. And I think the challenge President Biden has is that he ran on as somebody who could beat Trump and unify the country, but also somebody who was going to offer a pretty transformative agenda. And obviously, those two things tend to be in tension because, Yamiche, some folks voted for him for the former and some folks voted for him for the latter. And I think he's had to sort of try to pick a persona, and he largely chose trying to pursue a very progressive agenda. And to do so with a sort of equally divided Congress created some real challenges for him, and I think explains in part why his numbers have sagged. But we have some really fascinating details in here about his rivalries, including with former President Obama.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. Last question to you, Alex.
Yeah.
In the book, you report, quote, both of you report, Nancy Pelosi says, quote, Obama is jealous of Biden. And you also report that Biden reportedly told an advisor, I'm confident that Barack is not happy with the coverage of this administration as more transformative than his. Last question to you. Talk about that rivalry.
Sure. I mean, this is already such a time capsule from what feels like a different political age. But, people may find it difficult even to remember that this happened. But a year ago, Joe Biden was riding high. He had come into office. He had passed a $2 trillion COVID relief package that created this or greatly expanded the child tax credit. He was being hailed as the first president to really attack poverty in a sweeping way on the scale of Lyndon Johnson. And in those days, there was a whole lot of chatter around the White House and pretty close to Joe Biden that it sure seems like those clever Obama staffers who always looked down on him may have underestimated the old man after all. And there was a whole lot of chatter among columnists and pundits and Democratic leaders who were sympathetic to Biden and his agenda that finally the Democrats have a president who really gets how Washington works, can really work the Senate, work the House. And in those days, according to our reporting in this book, Barack Obama was jealous of Biden. He was frustrated with this narrative. And he would call up people in D.C. and say, listen, you need to understand, I was dealing with a different Democratic Party back then. I was dealing with a different Washington. It was a more conservative time. There was a defensiveness on the part of the former president because there's always been this prevailing narrative that suits them both very, very well politically, that they are brothers and the best of friends. And the reality has always been a lot more complicated. There's always been tension between the two of them. There's always been a lot of insecurity. Like all vice presidents, including the current vice president, Joe Biden put up with his fair share of indignities from West Wing staffers during his time in the vice presidency. And for a brief period of time in 2021, it sure seemed like the shoe was on the other foot.
Well, that is fascinating reporting. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much to Alex and to Jonathan and for joining us. I'm Yamiche Alcindor. Please definitely grab the book, and good night from Washington.